If the United States can fly into a foreign capital, seize a sitting president and put him on a plane to New York, then one question becomes unavoidable. Is it a breach of the international rules that were supposed to stop powerful states from doing exactly this? Because this is not just a Venezuela story. It is a test case for whether the global system still has guardrails. Let's walk through what happened, what the US is claiming, and what international law actually says.
So for the past several weeks, months, we've seen quite a bit of saber rattling from the United States against Venezuela. There have been threats made against the country itself and its government, especially President Maduro. President Donald Trump has had a call with President Maduro and essentially asked him to capitulate to US demands. Now, ostensibly, the issue that we're seeing here is that this is a drugs-related issue, that there are drugs that are emanating or that are flowing either through Venezuela or originating from Venezuela and then by road or by ship going to the United States. And we've seen a number of attacks on vessels by US forces, on vessels which have been alleged to be transporting drugs. We've also seen a bit of controversy here quite a bit of controversy where Pete Hegseth, US Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War, if you're to take his word for it, we see that he authorized double tap strikes, which is basically, hitting a target, and then when there were survivors, when it had no potential of being able to carry drugs anymore, they kill the survivors. And this became, somewhat problematic, as one would imagine.
That pressure exploded over the weekend. US forces carried out a military raid in Caracas. President Donald Trump then announced that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife had been captured and flown out of the country. This marked a sharp escalation from sanctions and rhetoric to direct military action on foreign soil.
Now what's happened is that we woke up today to Donald Trump tweeting that he has launched large-scale attacks in Venezuela and that he has captured the president and his wife, and they have been flown out of the country. Now, this is a major escalation, right? Targeting ships outside of the territorial waters of a country and then taking strikes within a country are two very different things.
The Trump administration says that this was a law enforcement operation. Maduro is facing US criminal charges first filed in 2020, accusing him of narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, and protecting criminal gangs. Those charges were updated this weekend to include his wife. But Trump himself has gone further, linking the raid to immigration, oil, and US economic interest. He has openly said American oil companies will return to Venezuela and take control of its petroleum industry.
Venezuela right now is a dead country. We have to bring it back, and we're going to have big investments by the oil companies to bring back the infrastructure. And the oil companies are ready to go. They're going to go in, they're going to rebuild the infrastructure. We built it to start off with many years ago. They took it away. The country is a mess. It's been horribly run. The oil is just flowing at a very low level, much lower than, even if it was badly run, it should have more income, more oil than what they do. So we're going to have the big oil companies go in, and they're going to fix the infrastructure, and they're going to invest money. We're not going to invest anything. We're going to just take care of the country. We're going to cherish the country. We're going to take care, more importantly, of the people, including Venezuelans that are living in our country that were forced to leave their country. And they're going to be taken very good care of. Yes.
That raises a crucial question. Can a country use military force to enforce its domestic laws inside another sovereign state? At the heart of this debate is the UN Charter, the foundation of modern international law. It strictly prohibits the use or threat of force against another state's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
There's simply no space or provision or exception in international law that would allow such a thing. And this is common sense. You don't need somebody with a background in international law to tell you this. What we're seeing right now is a violation of one of the most fundamental tenets of international law, which is enshrined in Article 2.4 of the UN Charter, which is this prohibition on the threat or use of force against the political independence or territorial integrity of another state, basically protecting the sovereignty of all states. Right, and preventing really the interference in the internal affairs of another country. And what we've seen here is exactly that the United States, using this urge to prosecute a sitting president, has gone ahead and taken this step, which really is a violation of Article 2.4. There really is no justification.
International law allows only two narrow exceptions. One, explicit authorization from the UN Security Council. That has not happened. Two, self-defense, but only if a state has suffered an armed attack meeting a very high legal threshold.
For this violation of Article 2.4. And the only exceptions, and this has been discussed elsewhere as well, the only exceptions is really if the UN Security Council authorizes you to use force against another state. That has not taken place. Or if there is an element of self-defense, that another state conducted an armed attack, and that has a certain threshold. That has certainly not been met.
Even if drug trafficking routes pass through Venezuela, that does not legally justify invading another country or capturing its president.
Even if you could prove categorically that there were drugs emanating from Venezuela and that the state was supporting that, there was attribution that you could make to the state of Venezuela, you can't go in and attack another state, and you certainly cannot go in and kidnap its president.
There is another major legal barrier: head of state immunity. Under international law, sitting presidents are generally immune from prosecution in foreign domestic courts.
The other element here is immunity. There is this concept of sovereign immunity. There's this concept of this immunity that presidents and heads of state have of other countries, and usually the courts of any jurisdiction will abide by this and refuse to prosecute or go ahead with a case when such a thing arises. Now we have to see whether the United States and U.S. courts will actually abide by this, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Of course, there are exceptions to this, and some of the most serious offenses, especially at the international stage, whether it's things like torture or crimes against humanity or things like that, you could be a head of state and still there wouldn't be any immunity for crimes like that. But in this particular case, whether it's arms or narcotics related, there isn't an exception to this. Maduro still maintains and has this protection under international law.
This means the case does not just raise questions about the raid, but also about whether US courts can even lawfully try a sitting foreign president. But beyond Venezuela, the interview points to something larger. This incident reflects a growing erosion of respect for international law itself.
The real issue here is the United States extending its own sovereignty or its own jurisdiction or its own ability against another state, and that is where the problem lies. Because what this essentially is symbolic of, or is a symptom of, is the lack of sanctity that international law is being afforded, especially over the past 2 or 3 years. And really, a lot of this can come from Donald Trump coming into power, but also what's been happening with, say, Russia and Ukraine, but especially in Gaza. So Israeli forces and the disregard they've had for the laws of war, the laws of armed conflict, international humanitarian law, and other precepts, basic tenets, the prohibition against genocide, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, all of those things have been violated time and time again, to such an extent that really the value of international law has fallen in that particular incident, but also it has a knock-on effect in other areas. What is also problematic is that, when Russia does something, it might not have the same impact as when a Western democracy, for example, violates international law. So Russian violations, as terrible as they are, do not undercut the foundation of international law, because Russia wasn't really the guarantor of international law. International law, especially after the Second World War, this rules-based order, the architects of this were Western European countries, the United States, and really Western democracy.
This concern is not just that international law is being broken, but who is breaking it.
So when they lose faith, when they start violating this system that they have propped up and that they have been the biggest proponents of, and especially the United States, that's when it becomes highly problematic, because the guarantors are now stepping out, right? They've lost faith in their own system. So anyone else, people who have been accused of violating international law, they're saying, look, you guys violate it all the time, why should we follow it right now? So this becomes really the problem. The sanctity of international law is breaking down, and we need to take certain steps to reensure that sanctity comes back. And it's not going to be easy, right? It's going to be highly problematic.
When the rules no longer restrain the most powerful states, others stop believing in them too.
Now, there are two things that could happen. One is that this international rules-based order collapses, and that you have a return to bloc politics and Cold War style issues and Cold War really on steroids. Or what you can have is that another state that is willing to be a guarantor, or group of states even, step up and replace the role that the US has abdicated. And China seems to be the number one contender here. It has that ability, that financial ability, but also that clout, really, if you will. And China has, on the whole, been somewhat better at adhering to some of the major aspects of international law. Of course, there are a huge number of human rights issues that arise, but it hasn't been going around and invading countries left, right, and center as other countries have been. So I think there might be a mix of some European and Chinese, leadership that comes and emerges from this withdrawal of the U.S. from the international stage, and that might lead to a different flavor of international law that develops going forward. Because when you take on this role as leader, you're able to shape it, and I think a lot of international law will now be shaped by China in its own image, and so you're going to have a different world there.
So, is the US intervention legal? Under the UN Charter, the answer appears clear. Using military force inside Venezuela to seize a sitting president without UN approval or a valid self-defense claim is extremely difficult to justify under international law. And that is why this case matters far beyond Caracas. Because if the rules no longer apply evenly, then the global system that was meant to prevent chaos starts to unravel. For more such explainers, subscribe to Dawn News English.